Everything needs to be channeled into a framework today that is promotable. And as soon as something is outside of a box, that's what our problem is, I think, with our culture in general, is that we don't now have the mechanism to see something that's outside of one of the particular boxes. And this film is a very good example. It's just on its own, and so in one sense a little bit lost. A man who looks after a cemetery, and in the cemetery the dead keep coming back to life.
You were saying, Franco?
The kind of main inference is that the world is dead, but the cemetery is alive. It's the whole story is a play about life and death and love and sex. For fans of people who like very weird films, then it has a weirdness if you don't understand the Italian connection of it, all of its own. It's one of the most peculiar films I've ever seen, really. It's the prototype of a very famous comic strip called Dylan Dog. And this comic strip is one of the most successful comics in Italy for the last, well, not so much now, but for about 30 years. The character was based on me. The guy, Tiziano Slavi, who's now dead, he wrote Dellamorte Dellamore and Dylan Dog using my character as the reference. So I'd known about it for years, really, because the cartoons were very, very popular, and part of my own popularity in Italy came from the fact that I was very much identified with this character. So I knew all about it, really, before doing the film. The director is a very, very great, in my opinion, director. He's called Michele Soavi, and he used to be Dario Argento's assistant for years, and this was his first film that he did after working with Dario. And he's a very clever filmmaker, and it was written by a writer called Gianni Romoli, who's also Italy's really best writer. Stylistically, you have to imagine a strip cartoon, really, and it's I think brilliantly styled, and the image of it is really, they took a lot of time thinking it out, but its reference is the cartoons. And so storyboarding, it's almost like a storyboard come to life in a way. And Michele, I think, was very, very good. He's got a great visual sense. In the history of strip cartoons brought to film, I think it really is one of the most successful ones. If you look at things like Dick Tracy, when, for example, the Americans try to bring the idea of a strip cartoon and then make it move, make it into film, they overdo it. It never works. I think this one, if you didn't know it was a strip cartoon, you'd be confused, I think, by this film, because it's a little bit languorous. But as a conversion of a strip cartoon into film, I think it's absolutely brilliant. You can feel the strip cartoon all the way through. I think it's got a lot of influence from Dario Argento. I think at the same time, I think it's got a lot of influence from Fellini as well. And I think it's got a character all of its own, funnily enough. So I think it's difficult to call a film like this a great film in a way, because part of it's a spoof. It has a spoof side to it. It has a Hammer House of horror side to it as well, but it's much more organized visually and thematically than a Hammer film. It's a fairly dense portrait of the corruption in village life in Italy. So it ticks a lot of boxes, I think. It's quite a heady film in a way. It's very difficult for any film to have a shelf life beyond 3 days nowadays, because auteur cinema's kind of finished, and everything looks old-fashioned, you know, within a year normally now, because we kind of surf a fad wave, I think, mostly. On the other hand, though, it found an audience. It really found a very, it found itself an audience of die-hard, you know, kind of geek fans who really appreciate, who go out and look for interesting films, and they found it. So it is, I think it is a very, very unique film. And I think Michele Soavi is a very unique director. And Tiziano Slavi, the initial, he's a very curious, weird freak. And it's a portrait of Italy that no one else has been able to tell.